Hi everybody and welcome back to another TFT guide. Today we are going to be doing an in-depth guide on how to play one of the strongest comps right now, FATED DRYAD SYNDRA. So let's get straight into it. Today's guide we are going to be talking about a few different things. We are going to start off with an introduction of the composition and talk about its objective, and then we're going to dive deep into the BIS Itemization, Augments, Positioning, and then talk about a stage plan for every stage of the game. Afterwards, we're going to do a recap, sum everything up, and then have a Q&A for anyone who is watching this live in the Discord of Training Grounds. Today will be just a general guide to understand this very strong comp, and this will allow you to really optimize either your items, positioning, augments, just overall all aspects of this comp to help you top 4 in your games and get that well-deserved LP. So before we dive into anything, I'm just going to do and talk about a few different terms here. Stage numbers, we'll be talking about a lot of different stages in this video. So whenever I say two numbers, that will be represented by X and Y. So like X, the first number will just be the stage number, and then the second number will be the round number. So a few Q1s, if I say like 2-1, 3-2, 4-2, basically if I say 4-2, then I'm just talking about stage 4, the second round. So that is how you interpret how to talk about specific stages. Next couple ones, so BIS, BIS basically just stands for best in slot. So this means either the most optimal or favorable option of something, whether it's like items or positioning. Stabilizing is basically creating a strong enough board where you could win most rounds, if not all rounds, of a specific stage. So this normally involves either rolling down to hit something, hitting a specific augment that is really good for your board, or like leveling, maybe even an encounter that helps you out and helps stabilize your board. Very last ones, we have a couple different like two terminologies that work well together. So single target versus AoE. This is a type of like board damage. So boards that are really good at killing one enemy unit at one time, so doing a lot of burst damage, is called like single target damage boards, compared to boards that deal moderate to a lot of damage to many/all enemies at one time. So this is single target versus AoE, or area of effect. Today we're going to be talking about Syndra, which is going to be a single target board. And then our very last one is one that I just added, weak side versus strong side. So weak side is the half of a board, whether it's yours, whether it's your opponent's. It's the half of the board normally containing weak or like trait bot units. And then they're easily killed. So normally they're either like low cost units or just unitemized units, just providing traits, compared to the other half of the board, which is a strong side, which normally contains the main tanks or carries of a specific comp. That's what weak side versus strong side is of a particular board, and this is just a quick list of some common phrases. Now we're going to go straight into the composition introduction. So if you have checked out our previous videos, you've already seen a version of the slides of FATED DRYAD SYNDRA. This is a lovely comp that uses many tiers. So this is going to be the main itemization for Syndra. It's a very good comp to counter duelists because of the single target burst damage. It allows you to kill through units like Lee Sin, who have a lot of sustain. And also there were recent buffs towards Syndra, which definitely buffed Syndra at a 2-star. Remember, when you pair a unit, it does not say online, but this is going to be a 20% max health increase for the two units that are paired. And in this composition, the main pairing we are going to be wanting to do is Syndra pairing with Ahri. That way, Syndra is able to gain, you normally have 5 faded in, so this is going to be 200% faded increase. So you'll normally have 22% more damage, and then Ahri will provide 60 AP. And since Syndra is going to be our main carry, having extra percentage bonus damage on her and AP is going to be ideal. And because we are not going to be linking Thresh in this case, we are going to be making Ornn our main tank, hence why we are playing 4 Dryad to get as much HP as we can on Ornn. So that is the intro into the composition. We're going to move on to the objective. So why play this comp? Well, this comp is a really strong, as I mentioned, single target magic damage burst comp. It's also a stalling/ramping comp because Syndra slowly becomes stronger per cast. Remember, per cast, she gains 1 extra butterfly, and she'll be able to do more damage as she continues to cast. A good thing about this composition, essentially, you have an infinite cap with Dryad, because as you kill more units, all Dryad units will gain increased HP. So technically, you could go infinite and just become extremely tanky. In regards to this comp, for item holders, you have 2 main item holders or categories of item holders. You have a mana/AP tank item holder, as in our Ornn, and then you have multiple backline AP caster holders. In early game, you can itemize either the Ahri or Kindred, and eventually shift over to itemizing your Syndra and Azir late game. So the one downfall of this composition, there's not really any AD item holders except for sets, which you're not guaranteed to hit until you're at least like level 8 or level 9. What does this mean in terms of components? This means item components such as tier, rods, and cloaks are going to be BIS. So these are going to be ideal components, where sword is our worst component. And at best, unless we have sets, we only want to have, or at least can use one sword, which will be one Spear of Shojin on Syndra, but additional swords are not ideal. Okay, moving on to our itemization, we have a couple different ones. So starting off with Syndra, we want mana items as a priority on Syndra. So there's going to be 2 mana generation items plus 1 damage item, either Jewel Gauntlet, Rabadons, or Gunblade. And our mana item combinations are either going to be Blue Buff plus Nashers, Blue Buff plus Adaptive Helm, or 2 Adaptive Helms. So this is going to be our best for Syndra, as you see here. So normally you could just do like a blue buff. Let's say you make a Jewel Gauntlet mid game. Then your last option can either be Nashers or Adaptive. However, if you do have an adaptive and let's say just like a damage item like Jewel Gauntlet, then you do not want to be building Nashers. Remember, you only want to build Nashers if you have that blue buff. And if you have adaptive, then you can either do a second adaptive or a blue buff to go along with that Jewel Gauntlet or Rabadons. So that is how the itemization you want to do for Syndra. This essentially just maximizes her casting and really helps her kit become more efficient and effective as you are fighting enemy boards. In regards of Ornn, so Ornn, as I mentioned in the previous slides, is going to be wanting to hold our mana items or AP tank items. So this is essentially anything like Vow or Redemption to get an early cast off, Crown Guard, Adaptive Helm, or Spark to make it more tanky, and also Spark to shred the enemy units, or Dragonclaw or Bramble depending on the lobby. Last but not least, we have Kindred, who will hold our leftover AP/utility items. So this is going to be either like Shiv or Red or Morello for burn/wound and some extra shred. Or if you have excess items, because we are linking Ahri and Syndra late game and we have 5 faded, that means all units will be benefiting from this AP and this percentage bonus damage. And Kindred actually puts out a good amount of damage and benefits from both AP and percentage bonus damage. So even if you just put like a blue buff Nashers or adaptive Rabadon's Jewel Gauntlet Guardbreaker, any of these on Kindred, late game with 5 faded activated, she will still be pumping out some good damage. So that is how the itemization wants to go for this composition. Moving on, we're going to be showing some stats of these items. So the way to interpret this is I have 5 faded and 4 dryad 2+ activated for both, along with Syndra with 3 items, Ornn with 3 items. And as you can see here in the first option, if your Syndra has an adaptive helm and a Jewel Gauntlet, then that means your third item is going to be wanting to be either a blue buff or an adaptive helm, as I mentioned. Archangel does have pretty good delta, however, I think it's a rather low sample size, so I would just stick to these two. And this confirms my previous itemization where I want to say if you have an adaptive, you can either do a second adaptive plus a Jewel Gauntlet or a blue buff plus a Jewel Gauntlet. This essentially works with just her auto attack timing along with having a maximum of 30 mana, so then she is able to essentially cast, in this case, with just a 1 auto cast. Our second option, which is going to be the most popular option, is having blue buff plus Nashers. And as you see here, Jewel Gauntlet, Rabadons, and Gunblade are all good third items, with Jewel Gauntlet having the most games played, which is why the sample size is really high, and I think it's going to be the best item, or is the best item compared to Rabadons. The reason why is you already have percentage bonus damage with Rabadons by linking to Syndra, so the extra 20% from Rabadons is not as important as it would be if you didn't have that percentage bonus damage already, hence why the ability to crit will provide some extra bonus damage. So that is Syndra itemization, just showing the proof behind it. And then for Ornn, any of these items with negative delta are great, as I mentioned. So Ionic Spark, Protector's Helm, or Protector's Redemption, Adaptive Helm, even Shroud has pretty good delta. I don't think it's that great. I would skip it for now unless I'm missing something, and then Declaw, and then everything else, as you see, is still, it gets a little bit worse, but it's still okay. I would just avoid building Titans, avoid building Warmogs, Gargoyles if you can, even like a Steadfast. So these are the items that you're going to be wanting to build for your Ornn. Okay, last but not least, we're going to be talking about our best in slot augments. So great augments to go along with this composition: highlighted Little Buddies, Baboon, Jewel, Lotus 3, and Comet Caster. These are going to be your main augments for this composition. These are going to be the best and really help you increase the power level of your board exponentially. Apart from that, just generic combat augments or even Caretaker's Favor. If this is Kindred specifically, then you're able to have kind of a second or third guaranteed carry, being able to hit Kindred 2 very early in the game and item stack her, and eventually you can hit Kindred 3 with that Caretaker's, only if it's Kindred, of course. FATED DRYAD Crest or Crown is very good mid game and late game. However, on level 8, it is not that great. I'll explain why later. Martyr, Inspiring Epitaph. This is good because this is scales off of max HP, and Dryad, we are going to be continually increasing our max HP by killing units, so Inspiring Epitaph will always gain more and more value. And then our very last one is just a tempo augment to help us get to level 8 and eventually level 9, so Epic, Raining Gold, or Slimin are very good as well. This is our level 9 board, where essentially we just add Annie, and then we replace Rek'Sai with Azir, and we replace Yasuo with Set. So let's move on to the positioning. This is pretty basic. Essentially, we want to kind of have a strong side and a weak side. So if we divide this down the middle, we can already see that we have our weak side on like one side and then our strong side on the other. What this essentially means is we want to have our Ornn on the same side as our Syndra. So then if we're fighting an enemy board on this side, if they're having a lot of like main carries on or main units on the same side of us, that means they have to get through the Ornn first before Syndra, which is ideal. This is classic front to back. Make sure that your frontline tank is getting hit first before your backline carries. So that is going to be our strong side, is basically just having Syndra and Ornn on the same side. Other types of positioning that I have included here. So Ornn, remember he prints an item to the nearest ally. So in this case, it's going to be a flip between Set or Thresh. Unless one of them already has 3 items, then it will be the other. This is fine. Both units are going to be good here, either extra tank on Thresh or extra damage and sustain on your sets. If this is a Yasuo, then I'd be more happy to move everybody over 1. So then Thresh would be the closest unit, and I'd be able to print an item over to my Thresh. Remember, your behemoths have to be together, at least on this patch. There is currently a bug where the behemoth buff does not transfer if there is a space or a different unit, or not even a space, if there's a different unit between the behemoths at the time of death. So then your behemoths definitely have to be beside each other. So then when Thresh dies, the behemoth buff transfers over to Ornn because there is no unit in between them, and he is able to get that increased resistances. Last but not least, positioning against duelists, one of the most popular comps right now, is very good for us being the Syndra player. We want to same side the Syndra as the Lee Sin. Basically, with that burst, we are able, a single target burst, we are able to kill that Lee Sin before they fully stack up their Titans or fully stack up their duelist stacks. And once the Lee Sin is out of the fight, then the duelist board will crumble and we'll be good to go. All right, we're going to move on to our stage plan now. So stage 1 and 2, very important. FATED Dryad is best as a tempo comp where we can get as many Dryad stacks as possible. However, that might not always be the case, and you can lose streak if you'd like for carousel priority to get those tiers. You want to be playing off your stage 1 unit drops, so look out for Thresh, Kindred, Nico, and Alawi to help out your board. Hold on to all Yasuo, Ahri, Rek'Sai, and Darius early game to help formulate a good, strong Fated board. And last but not least, in regards of itemization, backline items are Ahri and Kindred, and frontline on either Yasuo, Nico, Alawi, Thresh, depending what is 2-star, or you have items on already. So these are some options. The first one, just playing 3 Fated, pretty classic, level 4. Having 2 duelists in here. In this case, we would receive a Thresh from one of our stage 1 unit orb drops, and in this case we would just link together the Yasuo and probably the Yasuo and the Kindred, or even Yasuo and Thresh, depending on your itemization or if you have an item on Kindred. And then having 2 duelists in is actually quite good, especially if you have Yasuo 2-star. Yasuo 2-star got a little bit of a buff to his damage when his shield is up, so that is quite good for us, and hence why we'd want a duelist in. Our second option, let's say now it's 2-5 and we've leveled up to 5. This is a very good strong combo we can play where we have Arcanist activated by adding our Nico, and we're playing around Ahri. And then we have Duelist and Heavily activated and 3 Fated. So quite a strong comp and pretty good opener, depending on whether you have, let's say sometimes you high roll a Kindred 2, then you'd put the items on her. However, if you have an Ahri instead, or you're more likely to 2-star your Ahri, then you could put that backline item, whether it be an Adaptive Helm, whether it be a Nashor's Tooth, on your Ahri instead. So it's quite situational, but these are just some options to play your early game. Remember, if you don't have a strong early game and you just want to make gold instead, then that's perfectly fine. Lose streak, get your tier off of carousel, and look to play on stage 3. Starting stage 3, we're going to be wanting to play our strongest board. Here are two options, either playing 3 Fated plus good traits, so like Arcanist, Behemoth, Dryad, Ghostly Warden with this type of board, or by playing 5 Fated like this, and where we would need our Aphelios and Thresh. In this case, in the front comp or the top comp, you would want to bind Thresh if you have any items on him. If you don't have any items on him and you're, let's say, carrying your tank items on Alawi instead, then just bind your Ari and Kindred in the backline and just play around that Ari Kindred carry. In the 5 Fated, now all 5 units will have the Fated bonus depending on what you link. So in this case, you just want to link the Thresh and Yasuo to give a wide shield to everybody along with resistances. Look out for your augment on stage 3 too. This can really help you win streak your stage 3. So Baboom, extremely good. I think it procs twice on the Kindred bolts, or I know it procs twice on the Kindred bolts as she jumps, hence why Baboom is so good for her. And then also is just extremely good on Syndra. Comcaster and Unified are also really strong combo augments in this composition that will allow us to hopefully win streak and spikes the power of our board a lot. In regards to the Yasuo backline plus Thresh backline binds, Yasuo plus backline bind is a lot better if you have many 1-star units. Remember, Yasuo is a 250 flat shield with just 3 Fated, and that goes up to 500 shield for everybody at 5 Fated. So if you have 1-star units, they make much better use of a flat shield than if you were to bind Thresh plus a backline, which is giving resistances, 18 MR and armor, and 1-star units with bonus resistances is not as good as 1-star units with just a large flat shield. So that is how you want to think about that, Yasuo versus Thresh. And then very last couple ones, you can slight roll a little bit on 3-2 if you're sitting on a lot of pairs, or you have a streak you want to preserve, or you're really close to spiking. This is normally if you're sitting on like Kindred pair or Yasuo pair and they have items on them. Last but not least, remember off of Carousel and then hopefully just off of Krugs, or even if you're in a region or augment that allows you to select component anvils, you want to be prioritizing those Syndra items first and then prioritizing your Ornn items after. Okay, so let's keep going. That was stage 3. Now we're on stage 4. There's two options here. You have either your high roll level 8, which looks like this, or your low roll level 8, which looks like this. Mainly, it's the legendary units, so either Set and Azir, or Yasuo and Rek'Sai. You're going to be wanting to level to 8 on either 4-2 or 4-5. Remember, you can only level to 8 on 4-5 ideally if you're uncontested, which is not normally the case, but it does still happen. This way, you're going to be able to roll freely for your units that are not out of the pool. However, if you are contested, then you will have to level to 8 on 4-2 and then roll for your board. Continue to roll until you have at least 5 Fated and 4 Dryad. And then you can at least reevaluate from there. If you are heavily contested, then it's fine to sit on a stable 1-star version of your board and try to go level 9, cap around Azir and Set as your win con, if there are a lot of Ornns or Syndras out of the pool. Regardless of what you end up doing on stage 4, you need to be killing a good amount of units to continue stacking your Dryad and helping gain all of your Dryad units bonus max HP. Here are your two options. As I mentioned, it's mainly just Set and Azir versus Yasuo and Rek'Sai. And then at this point, you should try to have a 3-item Syndra with one of the combinations I said, either blue buff Jewel Gauntlet Nashers, or like blue buff Adaptive Jewel Gauntlet, or Adaptive Jewel Gauntlet. So one of these, as I mentioned, with your 3 main tank items on your Ornn as well. If you have extra items and you have healing reduction on your Kindred, make sure that you're same setting your Kindred as your Syndra, so whatever Syndra is hitting, they are also going to be healing reduction as well, or at least like wounded as well, to help you actually kill the unit you're attacking. Last but not least, we have our capped board. On level 9, we are going to be adding that Annie, Fortune, Invoker plus more frontline / CC. If you have a Fated +1, you can end up playing 7 Fated over Annie, and if you have a Dryad +1, then you can end up playing 6 Dryad over Annie as well. On level 10, you can add another Syndra, Set, or Azir with the Thieves Gloves. This is ideal. Remember, with 5 Fated, it is all Fated units on your board that will be benefiting from the extra AP and the extra opponent's % damage. So even just playing another Syndra, the Syndra will gain all the buffs as well. And then either playing another Azir, the Azir will gain all the 4 Dryad buffs, or playing another Set is just another good legendary unit and will benefit from these as well, even though it does not help him that much. So that has been everything for today. I will do a quick recap of how to play this entire comp, and then we will end it off for today and go into a Q&A. So today we talked about one specific composition that has been doing extremely well in the meta. FATED DRYAD SYNDRA is back. We talked about the best items for both Syndra and Ornn. We talked about the best augments to play and choose for this composition. And then we talked about how to position to ensure that you're playing front to back and your Ornn is tanking for your Syndra. We then hopped into a stage plan of what to do at each stage of the game, stage 1 and 2, holding on to those stage 1 drops and playing around them, either like the 2 cost or the 3 cost, or even opening for your tiers. Stage 3, playing either 5 Faded or a strong Ghostly Warden Behemoth variation. And then on stage 4, on 4-2, rolling for that 5 Faded 4 Dryad Syndra board, and then deciding whether or not you need to roll down again, or try to go level 9 and cap around that set Azir plus Annie. The final board I showed was on level 9, where you have your Annie as your 9th slot, or if you had a Faded +1 and a Dryad +1, then you could play the 7 Faded version or the 6 Dryad version instead. So that has been everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you comment, subscribe, and like. And if you're watching this in the Discord, we are going to move into our Q&A session, and there you can ask any questions that you have. So thank you very much, and have a great night.